Hi everyone, welcome to our lab walkthrough for Lab 4. This lab is going to introduce us to heart anatomy, and it's going to lay the foundation for the next few labs, which are going to be looking at how does the heart work, both physically and electrically, and then it's going to move into blood pressure and blood pressure reflexes. So the things that we learn in this lab will really lay the foundation, like I said, for the next few labs. Make sure to ask questions over anything that you struggle with in this lab, otherwise you will be lost when we get there. So let's go ahead and take a look at lab exercise 4. There's going to be some material in this lab manual that you will need to work on, as well as some activities in the lab worksheet, and the lab worksheet is what will be graded. So as always, we have our cover sheet for the lab that gives us the purpose, the learning objectives that we hope to achieve during this lab, and the different parts of the lab activities. First thing, a little bit of background. We're going to be learning about blood flow through the vessels, and remember we learned the vessels in lab 3, but now we're going to look at the actual layout of those vessels as blood moves through them. And when we look at blood flow through these vessels, there's kind of two main routes that blood can take, and they are called the circuits because they go from the heart to some part of the body and back to the heart. So it's a circuit, and there are two different ones. There's the pulmonary circuit, which takes blood from the right side of the heart to the lungs and back to the left side of the heart. And there is the systemic circuit, which takes blood from the left side of the heart to all the tissues throughout the body and then back to the right side of the heart. So the pulmonary circuit, the intention there is to take deoxygenated blood to the lungs where it can pick oxygen up and drop off waste carbon dioxide. The systemic circuit is to take oxygenated blood to all the tissues of the body, supply them with oxygen, pick up their waste carbon dioxide, so that then we can take it back to the lungs to drop off. So let's take a look. Instead of just describing what those circuits are, let's see kind of what those circuits look like. And of course, this is an artist rendition. This is not what it would look like, but it gives us an idea of what's going on. And if you want to see images like this, you can just Google image search for cardiovascular circuits, and you will get lots of similar images to this. Now, when we look at this, what we're seeing is in the middle of the chest, here we have the heart, and then since we are facing the person, remember anatomical position, we flip left and right, so we're talking about the patient's left and right. Over here is the left side of us, which is the right side of the patient. Over here is the right side of us, which is the left side of the patient. And we always refer to the patient. So over here we see the right lung, the right side of the heart. Over here we see the left lung, the left side of the heart. In this image, the blue represents blood that is low in oxygen or deoxygenated blood, and in the right is blood that is high in oxygen or oxygenated blood. Where it's purple, it's showing us where blood is flipping from one to the other. So we can just kind of pick an arbitrary point here since it's all a big circle or kind of figure 8, but let's start at the right side of the heart and look at the pulmonary circuit. Starting at the right side of the heart, the pulmonary circuit is going to eject blood from the right side of the heart into this vessel right here called the pulmonary trunk. This is an artery, and it's going to carry blood to the lungs. As it leaves, the pulmonary artery pretty much immediately splits into two vessels, a left and a right pulmonary artery. So let's follow the right pulmonary artery. It's going towards the lungs, carrying deoxygenated blood. It gets to the right lung. It's going to switch. It's going to drop off carbon dioxide and pick up oxygen. Same thing happens over here in the left lung. we're going to carry deoxygenated blood, drop off carbon dioxide, pick up oxygen, and now we're coming back towards the left side of the heart in the pulmonary veins. We get into the left side of the heart. We are now high in oxygen because we just came back from the lungs. Now we're going to leave the left side of the heart to go to the tissues of the body. We leave the left side of the heart carrying oxygenated blood into the largest vessel in the body called the aorta. And the aorta is going to deliver blood to the upper part of the body and the lower part of the body. Here we're carrying oxygenated blood up towards the head, the upper chest, the arms. Down here we're carrying blood to everything below the heart. Both of these are oxygenated. We get to the tissues of the body. We're going to drop that oxygen off and pick up carbon dioxide, carry that back to the right side of the heart, and now we're starting all over again. So that is the systemic and pulmonary circuits mentioned here. So now just kind of a brief overview of the heart. The heart is a very muscular organ. It uses something called cardiac muscle. That's the only place in the body where we find cardiac muscle. Cardiac muscle is similar to both skeletal muscle and also similar to smooth muscle. We're going to see some similarities when we look at it under the microscope. But let's talk about the big layout of the heart, the macroscopic, or the parts that you could see with the unaided eye. When we look at the heart, it's mostly hollow. It's got 4 chambers. The 2 chambers on the top of the heart, or the superior surface of the heart, are called atria. There's one right atrium and one left atrium. Atrium is singular, atria plural. So there are 2 atria, a left atrium and a right atrium. Those are on the superior surface or the top of the heart. The atria are receiving chambers. We also have 2 ventricles. Ventricles are the ejecting chambers. They're very muscular. Now, there is a left ventricle and a right ventricle. They're on the bottom or the inferior surface of the heart. If we look at our image here, this is the right atrium and the left atrium. The right ventricle and the left ventricle. The atria, since they receive blood, their walls are pretty thin because they don't need a lot of muscle. The ventricles, the walls are pretty thick because they are ejecting chambers and they take a lot of work. When you put your hand on your chest and you feel your heartbeat, really what you're feeling are those ventricles primarily. But let's look at the muscle that makes up the heart, the cardiac muscle. And here is one image. I'm going to bring up a little bit of a more magnified image. These are cardiomyocytes. Cardiomyocytes are just cardiac muscle cells. And when we look at them under a microscope with strong enough magnification, we can see that they have these stripes. We say they are striated, just like skeletal muscle was. But unlike skeletal muscle, which is, the muscle of your biceps brachii or things like that, the muscles that we think about moving, here, cardiac muscle is branched. Remember, skeletal muscle was very, very long. They were as long as the muscle itself, but they were very straight. They did not branch. Cardiomyocytes, cardiac muscle cells, they're very short and they branch. So here is one cardiomyocyte. We can see that it branches. It's kind of like a Y laying on its side. Down here we see another one. Here is the muscle cell, and then it branches right here, kind of like a Y laying on its side. We see these striations. The striations are because, just like skeletal muscle, they use the cross-bridge cycle, so they use sarcomeres, and these are those sarcomeres, just like we saw in skeletal muscle. But since the cells are so short, they have to join end to end. Skeletal muscle did not do that, but cardiac muscle, one cell ends, the next cell begins. They join end to end. And we can see that with these very dark stripes. These are not the striations that we see throughout. These are special structures seen in cardiac muscle cells called intercalated discs. At intercalated discs, one cell and another cell join end to end. That's what we're seeing right here. And intercalated discs have a lot of special features, including desmosomes or anchoring junctions to hold the cells together pretty strongly while allowing a little bit of give. And also we find gap junctions, which allow ion movement between one cell and the next. It allows action potentials or electrical signals to travel easily between these cardiomyocytes. We also see these very big dark staining nuclei. In some of them, we can see a little nucleolus inside. And then we can see those features here. Also, here the intercalated discs stand out pretty significantly. It's a little harder to see some of the striations there. We can see the nuclei pretty easily. But let's go down to the macro anatomy of the heart, the big structures that we can see on the heart. I am not going to go through all of these, but I am going to go through some of the major features. When we look at the heart on the outside, we can see these guys right here. They're kind of a purple color. On a real heart, they kind of lift up just a little bit. These are called auricles. This is the right auricle and the left auricle. But inside of each of these auricles, if we were to cut one open, that's where the atria are. Inside the right auricle is where we find the right atrium. Inside the left auricle is where we find the left atrium. Now, they are not very muscular. The walls are pretty thin because, again, the atria, those are receiving chambers. But down here, the main part of the body of the heart, this is where we find the ventricles. And there's a lot of muscle there. We can see that muscle tissue. And it's hard to see down here where the right ventricle or where the left ventricle is. The auricles are pretty significantly spaced, so we know where the right atrium is and where the left atrium is. But down here, how do you tell what's right and what's left with the with the ventricles? Well, this guy right here, this is the left coronary artery, and the left coronary artery lies along the border between the two ventricles. Everything off to this side, our left, the heart's right, this is the right ventricle. Everything over to this side, our right, or the heart's left, this is the left ventricle. It comes to a point called the apex, and the apex points roughly towards your left hip. Now, coming out of the heart, we see some blood vessels. These are called the great vessels. Up here we can see there's lots of vessels all over the surface of the heart. If we were to flip it around and look at the back, there's more still. But there's these large blood vessels. These are the vessels that actually enter or exit those chambers. There are 4 of them, and they are called the great vessels. Entering the right ventricle, there is the superior and inferior vena cava. So the vena cava returns blood from the body into the right atrium. Over here on the left side, coming back from the lungs, there are 2 left pulmonary veins and 2 right pulmonary veins. It looks like they're entering the right atrium, but they're not. They're passing behind the heart and entering the left atrium. So the pulmonary veins enter the left atrium. Now, exiting the ventricles, we've got right in the front, I'm going to scroll up here again, right in the front of the top of the heart is the pulmonary trunk. This is an artery. The pulmonary trunk pretty immediately splits into a right and left pulmonary artery, but this is the pulmonary trunk leaving the right ventricle. The aorta leaves the left ventricle. So when the heart contracts, when the heart squeezes, blood is pushed out of the right ventricle into the pulmonary trunk. Blood is pushed out of the left ventricle into the aorta. Now, in between each of the chambers of the heart, there is a valve. The valves allow blood to move from the atrium into the ventricle, but it prevents blood from going back the other way. The valves are one way. So over on the right side of the heart, between the right atrium and the right ventricle, is called the right atrioventricular valve, or the right AV valve. On the left side of the heart, we have the left atrioventricular valve, or the left AV valve. But if we looked at the right AV valve, it's got three little flaps, or cusps, and we call it the tricuspid valve. The tricuspid valve and the right AV valve, they're the same thing. Over on the left side of the heart, the left AV valve has two flaps, or two cusps. So we call it the bicuspid valve. Bi for two, tri for three. So the bicuspid valve, which is also commonly called the mitral valve. So the left atrioventricular valve, the left AV valve, the bicuspid valve, the mitral valve, those are all the same thing, just lots of different names for the same thing. The right AV valve, or the tricuspid valve, the right atrioventricular valve, they're all the same thing. Now, as we leave the ventricles to go up into either the pulmonary trunk or the aorta, there's valves there also. These are called semilunar valves. Semilunar valves. Going from the right ventricle into the pulmonary trunk is the pulmonary semilunar valve. On the left side, going from the left ventricle into the aorta, is the aortic semilunar valve. Now, if we look at the AV valves, they've got these stringy things attached to the walls of the ventricles. These are going to anchor those valves. They are going to aid it in opening, and they are going to prevent it from closing and reflecting back the wrong way. So these stringy things, they're very tough. They're called chordae tendineae. Chordae tendineae. And the muscles that they attach to on the ventricle walls are called papillary muscles. Papillary muscles, they're kind of like fingertips, but smaller. And they kind of resemble nipples. And that's what papil means. Papillary means nipple-shaped. So papillary muscle anchors chordae tendineae, which holds on to the bicuspid and the tricuspid valves. Now, the inside wall of the ventricles, lots and lots of muscle, and it takes on these folds, and those folds are called trabeculae carneae. There's some other features here to know. I'm not going to go through all of them, but you have them all listed right here. Now, here is the heart model. This image right here is the same as what we see right here. So this is artist representation of the anterior part of the heart. This is a model of the anterior part of the heart. All of the same structures are there. Here we have taken the front of the heart off. So what we've done is we've cut around the perimeter of the heart and lifted the front of the heart off. In both of these images, we are standing in front of someone and looking into their chest. Here we see the whole heart. Here we are seeing through the front of the heart to see the interior. How do you orient yourself? Well, if you're not sure what you're looking at, there's a couple of things. One, the auricles, remember this is where the atria are. They are upward. They are on the top of the heart, whereas the ventricles are on the bottom. So atria are superior, ventricles are inferior. Another way to orient yourself is to look right here, this large blue right on the front of the heart. This is the pulmonary trunk and the aorta is behind it. So that's how you know that you're looking at the front of the heart in anatomical position. Down here, an easier way to orient yourself is to look at the walls of the ventricles. The left ventricle has to pump blood to the entire body. The right ventricle pumps blood to the lungs, which are right next door. So the walls of the right ventricle are really thin compared to the walls of the left ventricle, which are really thick. Here we've taken that same thing. This image on the left is the exact same image that we see right here. Up here, I said we just cut around the perimeter of the heart and lifted the front of the heart off. Well, down here, what we've done is we've opened the heart like a book. And this can be a little confusing for students. What we're doing here is on the image on the left, this is still in anatomical position. The left side of, on your left side, is the right side of the heart. Your right side, so this is the left side of the heart. But if we have opened this like a book, well, now this is flipped. If we look at the image on the right, your right is the heart's right. Your left is the heart's left. Imagine you're standing behind someone looking through their chest into their heart. Well, this is what you would see. So how do you know what's what? Again, look at the walls of the ventricles. Over here, much thicker wall. Here, much thinner wall. Left wall, right wall. Left ventricle, right ventricle. So that's how you orient yourself. Here is an actual cadaver heart, which it's all just kind of a dull brown color. It's hard to orient yourself and know what you're looking at, but we are looking at the heart from above. So this is the aorta, largest diameter vessel in the body. Here is that pulmonary trunk, which is an artery. Here's one of the auricles. This is the left auricle. And down here is the right auricle. Down here we have the ventricles, and we can see a little bit of the apex. Now we've cut into the heart a little bit. We've rotated a little bit. What we're seeing now, we're looking at those valves. Here is the pulmonary trunk inside. We can see those pulmonary semilunar valves. Here's the aortic semilunar valves and the bicuspid and tricuspid. And this is kind of what we were just looking at in this image. We've taken the heart, we've folded it open. And to orient yourself, now here, our models don't do it justice. If you look at a real heart that has been cut open, it is really, really easy to see this is the left ventricle wall and the right ventricle wall. Look at the significant difference in those. Here, right ventricle wall, left ventricle wall. Look at the difference. The left ventricle wall, much thicker. Now, this is that wall that separates the right and left ventricle. It's called the intraventricular septum. This is a thick wall, but this is not one of the walls that we're using for orientation. This is just there to separate right and left ventricles. Here's a case study Now, when we're doing the case studies, I'm not going to go over them because I want you to work on them yourself, but you can answer these and then contact me and I'll be happy to give you some feedback on them if you would like. There is a typo on here that I just noticed. It asks about the left arm and the right arm. It should say left arm and neck. And when we're looking at this, it is not wanting to know what is the name of the vessel that was damaged. There's not enough information in the scenario to let us answer that. What it's looking for is what is the type of vessel in the left arm that was damaged? What is the type of vessel in the neck that was damaged? So vein, artery, capillary, arterial, venule, that's what it's looking for there. Same thing down here with question number 3. What type of vessel would have the fastest and slowest flow? All right, so that brings us to the end of this lab. If you have any questions as you work, please text me, please email me. If you want me to look over your work, reach out. Don't forget to go through the manual as well as go through the worksheet. The worksheet will give you points. The manual just introduces information and gets you used to labeling. All right, I will talk to you in the next lab.